webinar, Use Events to Identify High Net Worth Donors. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. Today's webinar will be recorded and sent out to you after the session finishes, and we'll also be taking questions throughout the entire webinar. And when you send those in, we're going to be compiling them for a question and answer session toward the end. You'll be able to find the questions section in the control panel, so feel free to ask away as we go along here. Today, we're very excited to have an amazing guest, Ian Loth from Winspire. Ian has an extensive background in event fundraising, marketing, and business development. Ian has led the marketing team at Winspire for about 6 years, conceptualizing and implementing marketing strategies to help nonprofits achieve their fundraising goals. So we're really excited to have Ian covering this topic today. Ian, thank you so much for being here.
For sure, Marty. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, Ian, we're going to let you take it away and get started, and we'll have some questions here in just a little while.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. And thank you to Kindful for hosting me today. I'm excited to share some of these tips that we've learned working for so many years in the event fundraising space, especially with live and silent auctions. And for those of you who are not familiar with Winspire and what it is that we do, we specialize in donor travel experiences. All right, and these are no risk travel experiences. You don't have to pay anything to use them in your event. There's no upfront costs, and you only purchase the trips after your event, only if they actually sell and raise money. So they're a great way to really round out your live auction offering, your silent auction offering, and get some really cool raffle prizes in there too. And we'll talk a little bit today about how the auction is an important piece, and auction items like these travel experiences are an important piece of attracting those high net worth donors to your event. But again, they're free to reserve. You can sell them as many times as you can, and then you keep all proceeds above the nonprofit cost. You can check out our whole catalog at winspireme.com. Just a few stats about us. We've been in over 50,600 events globally. This is since 2008 when we first started. We've serviced over 94,000 winning bidders. So we're sending thousands of winning bidders every single year on these trips. We know that they're very important to you. They're your VIP constituents, supporters, so we treat them with white glove care. And since 2008, we have helped raise over $56,339,000, which is a number that we're very proud of, and that number is growing every single day. So we'd love to hear from you if you have an event coming up and you are looking for some unique travel items for your auction. We'd love to hear from you. But today we're going to be talking about identifying those high net worth donors, how we go about doing that using our events as kind of the catalyst for bringing those people in. So we're going to talk about events as lead generators. We're going to talk about promoting your event, identifying those donors once they're at the event, and then finally the post-event follow-up. What are some just great tips there? Before we begin, I always like to start with a little bit of a poll, get everyone blood moving, so to speak, with those clickers of yours, and see if we can get some feedback to kind of get a good scope on what the events are like for you. So what is your revenue goal for your next big event? Is it A, less than 100,000? Is it 150 to 250,000, 250 to 500 or more, or you don't do revenue goals for your event? Now's the time to vote. We'll just give it a few seconds here. Once we have like 70 to 80% of the people voted, we can close it and then launch the results here. It could be for any event, whether it's a golf tournament, gala, what have you. You can go ahead and close the poll there, Madeline, and show the results. All right, great. So we have a good smattering here. A lot of good sized events. Some below the 100,000 mark, which is great. 150 to 250. That's really average, which I've seen as far as events go. And I guess I should have been more specific about what type of event we're looking at here. But still got some big events in the room, which is great. So let's go ahead and close that poll. And then I wanted to get one more question in here. How many people typically attend your annual gala? Is it less than 150 people, 150 to 250, 250 to 500, 500 or more, or you don't do galas? Maybe you have a signature event every single year where you might have a live or silent auction, and you have maybe a band or entertainment, and it's a good chance for you to get in front of those people. How many people do you typically have? All right, once 75% of the people have voted there, Madeline, you can go ahead and close it and launch it. All right, great, awesome. So we have some really good size events, between 150 and 500, some really big events out there, and even some people who don't host some galas. So that's totally fine. We have plenty of information that we're going to be talking about today that isn't just specific to the gala. So we're just going to be talking about events in general, but that's a good kind of average smattering there. So thanks for sharing, everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and start and talk about events as lead generators, because in many cases, that's really what they are. They're both a chance for you to engage your existing donors, existing constituents, but also they are a fabulous place to start recruiting new people to enroll in your cause. But before we get there, I wanted to kind of go over the types of events that we can that we're discussing here today. Obviously, there's the dinner galas where you come, everyone gets dressed up typically, and you have a dinner, maybe a live or silent auction. There's golf tournaments are extremely popular as far as events go. Run walks, we're seeing a lot more of those these days. Nonprofits teaming up even and doing kind of co-branded run walks with a lot of people. Seeing a lot of social hours, happy hours, that are maybe not a full dinner gala, but fewer people, more intimate setting, smaller live and silent auctions, which is a great way to also engage your most important donors. And then procurement parties, which is just a great way to kind of get your whole, organization volunteer base involved in doing some procurement for auction items. And it's also a great way to really key them in on expanding your reach when it comes to events. Today, for the purposes of today, we're going to be talking mainly about these three: dinner galas, golf tournaments, and those social hour happy hours. Now, when you're talking about an event as a lead generator, okay, what are we trying to do? We are trying to create an event community, right? We want to create an event that people feel like they're going to be missing out if they don't attend, right? The second you're looking for those movers and shakers in the community, you really want to define what that community looks like. Who are you trying to recruit within your community? It doesn't matter if you're within a huge city or a small town. There's going to be a cohort of people that you're kind of targeting with your event in terms of who you want to get there. And you're really looking for those movers and shakers, right? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But the people who are obviously wealthy enough to give, right, care about your cause, and kind of have kind of a like-minded aptitude for really driving your cause and wanting to contribute, right? So you want your events to show up on the social calendars of C-suite level individuals above all, right? You really want those owners of companies, the executives, and practitioners who have the means, and you want them to be aware of it, right? And in order to do that, you have to get a few people like that involved. You want to make them feel like they need to be there because they're connected, and you want it to be the it place to be, right? So who are we looking for? We're looking for business owners, entrepreneurs, corporate executives, community leaders and activists, right? Especially related to your cause. And then also doctors and lawyers. It's kind of another cohort of people that are typically, wealthier and care about causes. So this is a great group of people to target when you're trying to, talk about lead generation with your events. But above all, it's not about selling the most tickets. This is a common thing that we hear a lot, that it's just kind of a misconception, right? That, getting more people at your event isn't necessarily better, right? Especially because if they just come and buy the ticket or just attend and then don't do anything, don't donate money, that's money out the door that you're actually wasting, right? So it's much better to get fewer highly qualified guests than it is just to get more people off the street. And that's why, spending $30,000 on a band to try to get everyone and their mother to attend your event isn't necessarily the best investment, right? Because you're not trying to get as many tickets sold. What you want is a far more targeted strategy of who's going to be there, creating that event community, and how can we get those people there, right? So you want to spend your more time on building those relationships, which we'll talk about here in a second. Time equals money. This is a refrain that I always emphasize for you nonprofit event organizers out there. Your time is a resource that you have to use very carefully, right? So instead of spending all of your time on, pounding the pavement, asking for small donations, silent auction items, soliciting local businesses and just knocking on doors, that time could be spent really building relationships, networking, figuring out ways to get in front of the right people that you want at your event. And then your time and money will actually go much further in terms of as a resource, right? It will have a much bigger payoff in the end if you're spending your time getting the right people to the event, networking, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. So let's talk about event promotion. How do you go about actually doing this? I'm gonna take a little sip of water here. Excuse me. All right, so now we want to get those people at the event. How do we do it? We do it by promoting the event. And above all, we emphasize this in every single webinar I do, or with constituents in the industry. You got to start with the cause, right? You got to enroll people in your cause, make the reason for the event at the forefront. You're not just having a party, right? Yes, you want it to be fun and you want it to make it the it place to be, but remind people of why you're there, why it's important. Keep your stats and short and concise and to the point. What are we raising this money for? Is there a specific reason that we're doing it? And always keeping that at the forefront. And then of course, it's going to be a hell of a party, right? You always want to convey that, because if it's not, doesn't look like fun, people aren't going to be there. So you want to make it fun, but you want to do that in conjunction with keeping your cause at the forefront. Lynn Page, who's the National Director for Special Events at JDRF, a good close friend of mine, she raises over $80 million a year at 70 plus events. So she knows how to get the right people to her signature events. And this is what she says in terms of what to communicate, right? Number one, what is the mission goal of the event? See how she put that as number one, not number two, right? What is the mission goal of the event? What does the money go to? Right? So where is the money going to go to specifically? Not just, hey, we need it for just, solve type 1 diabetes, but hey, we are going to do it for this specific treatment that is going to result in this many people cured, that sort of thing, right? Why is it important, right? Kind of the broader picture, the why. What's in it for the people who are giving the money, right? How is it going to help them? And then also she puts here what auction items are going to be available to purchase. Auction items are a huge driver of promotion for promoting the event. It's a great way to get out the word and say, hey, can you believe they have a trip to Kansas, Film Festival or Napa Valley or what have you? And that's where we come in too, as far as Winspire, securing those big ticket items, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to promote the events. It's such a key part. And then other high level guests or VIPs to really draw them in. And this is a really key part that I think people forget to do is it's okay to say who else is going to be there, right? You want to do that because that's how you create that event community and make people feel like they're going to be left out if they're not in attendance. Right. So if you're saying so-and-so and so-and-so is going to be there, they're going to start thinking, well, where's my invite? So that by the time it gets around to them, they say, I know about that event. I see it's on the social calendar. I was wondering when I was going to get an invite. Of course, I'd love to be there. Right. That's the sort of kind of mentality that you're looking for from these people. Relationships. All right. I kind of touched on it a couple times already, but your objective as the head of your event, the event planner, is to network, right? Delegate the tasks like organizing silent auction items, going out and pounding the pavement, asking for small donations. Your job is to get the right people into that ballroom or at that golf tournament so that they are the people who are going to come and spend money in support of your cause, right? And you need to find and build upon existing relationships. Find out who's already coming to your event and who is the people. Identify the people who are already coming to your events that you want more of, right? Then you want to build upon those existing relationships to expand your reach, right? So instead of blanketing your community with flyers, you want to spend more time with your board members' Rolodex, taking existing VIP donors out to lunch, asking them, which of their friends or people are, might be interested in the cause. So ask for introductions, reiterate your involvement, involvement and the involvement of others, ask questions and find out what people care about, but don't oversell it, right? You don't want to be obnoxious. Last thing you want to do is have your board member open up their Rolodex and then be hesitant to do that for you, right? You just want to be the best source of information for how to get involved, okay? And I mentioned the board members Rolodex. This is a great place to start. For those of you who might not have those VIP donors, but you do have board members, these are people who signed up, right, to help your cause, and they should have that network out there within the community. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a board member, right? And they're on the board because they care. We hear a lot about, complaints about board member involvement, but this is one of the easier jobs of theirs to do. It's not like you're asking for direct donations. What you're asking them to do is they're asking for introductions, right? You're asking for them to introduce you to their Rolodex, their friends, to try to spread the word about the event and get the right people there, especially for corporate tables too. which we'll talk about. We've got some quick tips from professionals, benefit auctioneers in the industry. I went around and asked some questions and saw what they thought were some really important things that people tend to neglect. This is from Danny Hooper, another close friend of mine. He recommends recruiting an honorary chair, and some of you may do this for your event, some of you may not, but an honorary chair is kind of a figurehead, a public figure who'd be willing to, help talk about your event, promote your event. I'm going to read what he says here. He says, I always recommend selecting a high-profile person from the community to be an honorary chair. Their only expectation is that they attend your event and allow you to cultivate their network of contacts in their promotional efforts. Right? This helps to elevate the profile and the cause of your event that your event is supporting. Notice how the main reason to have an honorary chair there is for networking, right? To network with that person's, influence and reach is really what you're looking for when you're talking about event promotion. Corporate tables, all right? This is a huge piece that a lot of people maybe kind of wade into, not certain what to do. The most important part about asking for corporate tables is to express your expectation and desire for qualified guests, right? So many times, so often, you'll ask for a corporate table or a company to buy, a table, and then the tickets will end up by the water cooler, right on the coffee table. And that's the last thing you want. When you're approaching a business, you're approaching those entrepreneurs, high profile people in the community, you want to make sure that when they purchase a table, they are going to bring people with them that are going to participate and donate money, right? So when you contact them, you really want to draft a nice letter, and you want to, again, be very clear about your expectations for the people that you want them to bring. And this is a great example here. I'm going to read it on the screen. It says, Bob, thank you so much for offering to purchase a table. If you're able, we would very much appreciate like-minded individuals who might support our cause. Every single chair at our event is extremely valuable, right? But only if we have the right people in those chairs. You might consider inviting your suppliers, golf buddies, vendors, friendly competitors. That's another thing that I thought was a great tip from Danny. So the key here is that you want to get them thinking about it, right? You just want to get them thinking about who they might invite. If you don't ask and you don't coach them and tell them, they're not going to think twice about it. They're just going to buy the table, and they're going to move on to the other parts of their busy schedule. But if you are very specific in coaching them of who to bring, they're much more likely to do it. And that tip at the very end about your suppliers, golf buddies, vendors, friendly competitors, this is so key. It's very easy for businesses, especially business owners, to put pressure on their suppliers and their vendors, right? Because they can say, hey, this cause is really important to me. I'd love it for you to attend. And those people who are getting business from them are going to really want to impress them, right? They're going to want to impress that business owner who cares about a cause. So they're going to be far more likely to come to the event and spend money in front of that business owner, right, to continue earning their business. So if you can kind of nudge those people who are buying the corporate tables, hey, why don't you try your suppliers or your vendors, or give those suggestions as far as who should be coming. And so make sure that if you have table captains, you're coaching them on this when they're going out and they're asking companies. Whenever you get some interest in buying a corporate table, you're doing a follow-up. You're not just saying, great, here's where you sign, we'll see you at the event. You're coaching them on who they should be going out and filling those seats with. I'm taking a sip of water here. All righty. Promoting the live auction items. Mentioned before, big ticket items are a great way to attract high net worth donors, just to get their ears perked up, right? Oh my gosh, we can go see, Carrie Underwood. We can go, to the horse races. These are things that they wanted to do anyway, but now they have an additional reason to want to come and support and, maybe purchase that experience in support of your cause, right? And that's really where Winspire helps secure those big ticket items, the unique travel packages that are around the world that might be very difficult for your procurement team to procure, right? But just a few of them, right? 3 or 4 in your auction is going to really help give you some great tools to actually promote your event, whether it's on social media, email, or print, right? You can come easily reserve the packages. We'll give you all the imagery, the things you need to make it just kind of wow, so that it adds that credibility, attracts those high net worth donors. They then come to your event. Let's break these down each, for a second here. So social media. You have a social media, hopefully, for your organization on your page, posting daily, right? Posting daily about your cause, things that you're actively doing. I would, throw in there every day or two event updates, things that you're planning your event. Oh my gosh, we just secured the venue. menu items are here, right? And then the best ones that you can be doing are auction items. Check out what we're going to be offering in the live auction. You know, we have an incredible Game of Thrones package where you can go see where Game of Thrones was filmed in Ireland, right? Go visit 6 castles. That's a Winspire package that is just tremendously popular for promoting Hamilton Broadway. All these things are just great things that just look beautiful on social media, get people to click and like and engage, and then they can start talking about what they want to spend money on when they get to the cause. It could also be your silent auction items. And especially if you have a mobile bidding partner out there, like whether it's One Cause, Greater Giving, Give Smart, you can post those auction items online and have direct links to it so people can actually go check out the details. Same with email. Email, you want to do a little less, right? Make sure your frequency, especially when it comes to the event, isn't too often, but you can definitely send emails leading up to the event, especially as the event draws near. Maybe it's like within a month, you can start sending maybe weekly emails, talking about the event, even if they've purchased tickets, here's what you can expect. We're excited to see you, that sort of thing. And then of course, print. This is, the more traditional, posting at local grocery stores. Again, be a little bit careful here, right? Instead of spending time and money on print advertising, what's I think a lot more valuable use of time is that networking and directly appealing to people. But you do want to have those, hard invitations. A beautiful invitation goes a long way to attracting those high net worth donors, and especially if you have good little flyers that you can give to people to hand out to their network. That's really where print promotion comes into play. Scout other events. All right, this is kind of an interesting one. So finding like-minded causes that with major recurring donors. So I'm sure that depending on the size of your community, maybe especially if it's a full city, this is totally kosher to do. The smaller the town, maybe it gets a little bit hairy, but what you can do is you can put on your detective hat, right? There's a lot of public information out there, especially in terms of what other nonprofits in your area post thanking their donors after events, right? So, and donors don't just donate to one cause, especially these wealthier donors. They donate to multiple causes, right? And they could donate to multiple organizations that support the same cause, right? So it's okay for you to go and put on your detective hat and go find out who these major donors are in your community and find out what events they're attending and what they're donating to, right? So especially after big events, if you're aware of maybe another organization that's similar, it doesn't have to be a competitor. That's where it gets a little hairy, right? So if it's if it's they support the Equestrian Society, they might also support an animal shelter, right? They like animals, right? That's a totally appropriate thing where you can go and try to find a way to approach that donor. If it's a direct competitor directly across town, then you don't want to be poaching, right? That's kind of the key word here. You don't want to be poaching other people's donors, but it is okay to go find out the donors who are active in the nonprofit community, see what they like and in terms of what they like to support, and then figure out a way to approach them, right? The key here is you're just trying to find out who those figures are, so then you can go out and find them, right? It's kind of the difference between putting up flyers one to many, right, versus you going on and putting your detective hat, finding out exactly who you want at your event, right? And then figuring out the strategy that you're going to use to go find out how to get them there, right? That's the key here. All right, identifying wealthy donors at your event. This is a key part. So now you've done your promotion and you're getting to the event night, and you know that there's a lot of people in the room that you don't know yet. That's the best problem to have, right? Especially if you know that they're sitting with really important people. Okay, so the first and foremost, the most important thing you want to do is collect information, right? And this has gotten a lot easier today with things like Kindful and event registration things, and the mobile bidding text like One Cause, for example. When you register for an event, you have to put in your contact information, but make sure that you're gathering name and contact information. These days, it's totally okay to ask for people's email address. All right, I know a lot of people get concerned about that. Just ask for it. We were just at Raise 2018 with One Cause, and this was a big panel question. We had a representative from Charity Water there, and he was talking about, their concern with asking for email address. Don't worry about it. Ask for email addresses, and you know what? People are a lot more apt to give them to you today, but it's really important for post-event follow-up, sending receipts, that sort of thing. Just don't just don't spam them, just don't inundate them, and maybe give them the opportunity. If they do object, you can give them the opportunity to opt out. Hey, if you don't want to receive any communication, we'll opt you out of everything else, but it's really important to have that email. But contact info, of course, so that you can follow up with them after the event. And this is going to be a little bit more important a little later, which I'll talk about. All right, once it's the night of the event, very important, your job, make sure that you have delegated everything. You have somebody else, being the point person for everything else, so that you, as maybe the development director or executive director, are observant on the floor. You're interacting with people. You are finding out who's who, especially those who you don't know, and pay attention. Right? You want to see who's sitting with you, who's well dressed. It might sound superficial, but pay attention. If someone's extremely well dressed, they're probably well heeled, and they're the person that you want to talk to. This doesn't go for everybody. There's a caveat here, which I put. It's an important note. Don't always read a book by its cover. Right? There's definitely also going to be people who don't show off and might not be dressed, to the nines, but are still, there's still a lot of money to back it up. Right? It's very, very common for nonprofits to really underestimate the giving power that's within the room, because you just simply don't know, right? You just don't know people's finances, and it often surprises people. So I'm kind of talking out of both corners of my mouth right now, but above all, it's just important for you to be observant. Who are people talking to, right? People tend to gather in the same socioeconomic circles. So if you know that there's kind of one person that's rather wealthy, maybe he's one of your VIPs, or as a guest, pay attention to who they're talking to, mark them, right, and figure out a way to go and get yourself introduced. All right. The live auction, using the live auction. This is another really key, important piece of why the live auction is so important, not only promoting the event, but also the night of the event. When you're offering out live auction items, you want to be writing down every single bid number, right? Every single person who bids above, say, $1,000, you want to be talking to them, right? And this is another really important piece of why it's so great to include, Winspire travel packages, for example, but just big ticket items in general, is because you might have just one winner, but you had 10 or 15 people bidding on it, right? And there's going to be second, third, fourth place bidders who never win anything, right? But just because they don't win doesn't mean they don't have the money, right, to support your cause. So those people, you want to have somebody at the front of the room, right, with maybe something to record or write down, and you want to be writing down the bidder numbers and amounts of every single person who sticks their hand in the air, because auction items, live auction items, are a great, great tool for identifying the wealthy donors in the room. How else are you going to do it? There's being observant, but these people are literally raising their hands saying, hey, especially if it's a more expensive package, I have $5,000 to spend on this in disposable income or philanthropic income, but uh-oh, I didn't win, right? You still want to be taking that person out to lunch, following up with them personally. All right. So that's another reason why it's so important to offer enough big ticket items. Here's just a smattering, some examples. There's some Winspire packages kind of interlaid within here, but adorable puppies. I know that some states are frowned upon that, but in the events I've been to, they're just always huge money makers. Dinners are also very popular, local sporting events. But you want to have some things that are bigger ticket, right? That take you around the world. Iceland, going to Europe. You want to try to get those big ticket items out there to really attract those bids. This is from Scott Robertson. He's out of Florida. He's a fabulous benefit auctioneer, another close friend of mine. I've worked with him for a few years now. And he says, make sure you have a key staff members up front during the live auction so they can watch the faces of the bidders and see who is getting excited about which items, which can inform your development team and procurement team for future events. That's so key, right? But make sure that they're off to the side, not in the spotlight. All too often, staff are tying up loose ends during the live auction and missing the valuable opportunity. That's why I said before, you want to have point people that are delegated to really running around, getting all the things tied up. You're, as one of the leaders, right, of your nonprofit, right, you want to be spending your time on the things that are going to be making the most money, right? And that means really engaging with folks during the social hour, and also paying attention during the live auction and the fund and need especially. How do you do it? How do you introduce yourself? This might be kind of a little simple, but it's also just important to reiterate. It's and it's good reminders about how not to be shy and how to build relationships. Okay, we're going to go over these real quick, but there's just some tips that even I think it's helpful even just for me, just in general, right? Like when you're in an uncomfortable situation where you don't know people, for a lot of people, it's not second nature to just be able to go up and start interacting with folks and building that relationship. So what do? A great way to introduce yourself is by complimenting people's attire. It's a very easy introduction. Try finding the well-dressed women and compliment their husbands' suits and ties and shoes. This was a tip from Ailey Byers, an auctioneer, and then because obviously, then you can say, obviously, you put him together, ma'am, and then you can all have a laugh, right? So it's kind of a good way to really introduce yourself. Attire, people are getting dressed up usually for these things. A golf tournament, maybe not so much, but especially galas. Enlist a board member. Oftentimes, board members will know more people in the room than you do, right? So if there's someone you don't know that you want to know and you're trying to find an in, go ask a board member, say, hey, do you know who that is? Do you know someone who might know who that is? Can you help facilitate an introduction for me? Board members are typically really helpful with that, especially if they had a few glasses of wine. Third, ask about their involvement. There's going to be people there who are not involved at all. There's going to be people who are maybe interested in. What you're trying to do is really gauge how much they care. See if they're just somebody's sister who is there for the event, and then you can, engage with them shortly. Don't get stuck, right? Especially if you can tell right away that they're not going to be, it might seem a little callous, but you got to, business is business here, right? If you don't want to get stuck talking to someone who isn't going to end up, your time is money, isn't going to end up donating money, right? So politely excuse yourself, move on to the next person, and just try to make the social rounds as much as you can, gauging people's interest in the cause, asking about their existing involvement, asking about their involvement in other charities. That's a great indicator to see, how much they are potentially going to get involved in your cause as well. See if they care, right? This one's from Ailey. Quick tip about introducing yourself. I like to approach guests who are active in the live auction but didn't win and thank them for bidding. Then I'll ask them, what would have made you bid again? You were so close, joking around to get to know them a little better and gauge their interest. If they say, I didn't think it was worth that much, then it's not about the money. That's a really key point here. If they said, I didn't think it was worth that much, then that doesn't mean they don't have the money to bid more, right? That's an open-ended question, right? That means they might still have and would be a good person to get to know, right? If they're saying things like, oh, it got out of my price range, that's one thing. But if they, I really didn't think it was worth that much, but it did get me excited, that means they have some disposable income to throw around, all right? I thought that was such a small thing that I was like, wait, Ailey, back up. What did you say there? Because that's such an important piece. These little cues can help you figure out who in the room you should be following up with. All right. Speaking of which, post-event follow-up. I'm going to take a little sip of water here. Saying thank you. I feel like this is another one of those things that I reiterate on every single webinar I do for event fundraisers. But saying thank you and personally contacting every single donor, or having someone do it, right? Personally contact every single donor who spends above a certain amount, right? If someone's only spent a few $100, having that automated, letter or thank you or something like that's okay. But if, as soon as you start to get into, multiple hundreds or thousands of dollars, they need a special follow-up. And it's a phone call. It's a handwritten thank you note, a bottle of wine, right? Anything that gives that personal touch that makes them go, oh, wow, they really noticed that I participated, especially if it's a first-time donor, right? Or a second-time donor. If it's any type of donor, right? If it's a long-time donor, you want them to feel really, really happy that they are involved in this event community, right? And so it should be to everybody, right? And it's amazing what happens when people neglect to do this and how much it affects those donors. Like, talk about donor fatigue. People are just feeling like money and it's going into a black hole and they're not getting thanks. That's the quickest way to get rid of a donor, or eliminate the possibility that a new donor is going to come back, right? So making sure that after events, once you've had a face-to-face with people, right, you have another sort of personal connection, whether it's a phone call, handwritten email. God, have you ever heard of a handwritten email? I haven't, but handwritten note that will kind of give that personal touch and that personal follow-up. Building relationships. So I'm just going to end on this just because it is such an important piece, right? Relationships, relationships, relationships. Make sure that you're offering to take people out to lunch. Continue that face-to-face dialogue, right? So one of the best parts about events is that it's your, oftentimes one or maybe two chances out of the year to guarantee a face-to-face with these donors. Try to make it 4 or 5, right? By taking them out to coffee. Asking them what they'd be interested in seeing in the auction this year. Where do they want to go? What do they think about the current state of the nonprofit, the initiatives that they're doing? Any tips? People love to talk, especially about themselves, right? So if you can get a donor to sit down and just ask them engaging questions about the event, about your nonprofit, and then just nod and take their advice to heart, I guarantee you're going to get some great kernels out of that will help you not only improve future events, but also what you're doing as far as your donor relationships are concerned. So, and with each and every one of them, right, you're just reminding them about the cause, reminding them, hey, anybody that that you can put me in touch with that you think would help facilitate the next year's event. The job never ends, right? It's constantly cycling circle of relationships with these donors, trying to expand that reach. So I think I'm going to finish with that. Just wanted to talk about a few of the top selling packages we've been seeing in 2018 as far as these big ticket items that you can put in your live auction, right? Tuscany Culinary Escape is one of our biggest, most popular packages right now. Who doesn't want to go to Italy and go hunt for truffles and have a great dinner? Ireland Adventures, I should have made that the Game of Thrones one that I mentioned. Our Game of Thrones package is one of our top sellers right now. You get to explore some of the actual castles they filmed in for Game of Thrones. Hamilton, Chicago, it's actually more popular now than the one in New York. You can get just tickets, or you can meet the cast. Napa is always just great. We put you on the wine train. There's a chauffeur, wine tastings, and then of course the tropics. So check these out if you have an event coming up. We also have hotel only stays that are less expensive, that are great for the silent auction tables. Especially if you're having just a golf tournament, you don't have a live auction, you can put these hotel only stays out there. It works the exact same way. No risk, doesn't pay, you don't purchase anything, no cost up front, no hidden fees or anything. There's just simply a nonprofit cost associated with each one. You put it in your event, and then you start the bidding above the nonprofit cost. We recommend 20% above, and then you keep all the proceeds above the nonprofit cost. So if there's $500 in room nights you put in your silent auction, it goes for $800, you keep $300, as just an example. But it typically goes much higher than that. So these are just some examples of the hotels that we have that we partner with for preferred hotels. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to winspireme.com. And there it is, the website, winspireme.com. I wanted to just share a couple other things. We're also giving away a $1,200 travel package that you can use in your next auction if you come subscribe to our blog, Winspire News. You can go to winspireme.com/giveaway. We do this about once a quarter. We're giving away our next trip on November 1st to one lucky subscriber. So definitely check it out. We come out with weekly content just like this that we shared today. And last but not least, we have a podcast too, where we talk all about event fundraising. It's called Events with Benefits. I have my friend Danny Hooper, who I mentioned, Renee Zhao, who is the owner and founder of Donation Match. We come out with episodes weekly. They're just a lot of fun. We talk to event leaders in the industry. We just had someone from Walk with Sally talk all about their 1,200 person walk that they do. Just some great folks that talk about technology, best tips for events, and just great examples of success stories. So you can find that out wherever you get your podcasts. Search with Events with Benefits or go to eventswithbenefits.com. And that is it for me. Did I do all right there, Marty? On time?
That was fantastic. Yes, right on it. Very, very well done. Ian, thank you so much. That was fantastic. At this point, we're going to go ahead and start shooting over some questions. We do have a few that have come in here already. If you would like to get questions over to Ian, please send those in now, and we will try to get as many across as we can in the time we have remaining. Ian, do you mind if we start a little rapid fire here with you?
Yeah, hit me. I'm ready.
All right, fantastic. So the first one we have is, how much upfront cost is needed to offer an auction with these type of Winspire packages?
None. So yeah, just to reiterate, doesn't cost you a single red cent to put these packages in your auction. You can simply reserve them on our website, and then we give you all the display materials, the photos, we give you displays that you can blow up to a poster size, put into your PowerPoints, and then you only purchase the packages after the event, right? And only if it actually sells and raises money. So we recommend starting the minimum bid about 20% over the package cost, and that way you're guaranteed a 20% return, even if you just get one bid. But if nobody bids, you don't pay anything, right? And so it typically goes up from there. Our average return on these packages is somewhere above 45 to 50%, but it does go much higher than that as well.
All right, fantastic. So the next one we have is, how soon after an event should we be following up? What is the limit for an appropriate follow-up?
It's a great question. I think it has most to do with capacity, right? Like, you're going to be exhausted after the event. And so, give yourself a day to recharge, first of all. That's most important. And then, it should be the first thing on your mind as you're coming back into the office. And, within a week or two, that thank you note should be sending out. You want it to be top of mind as people are coming off the event, especially if they purchased items or, participated in any way. If it goes beyond a week or two, then they're really going to start feeling it, I think. So if you can get it out, within the week after, sometimes the mail takes a little longer, of course, but and obviously it totally depends on the size of your event. I mean, if you have 500 people and you had a ton of them that were bidding above a certain amount, I would just definitely start from the top down, of course. So the people who bid the most, you're going to be following up with first, both phone call, handwritten thank you, and then you can start to plan it out from there based on how many, staff or volunteers you have. So definitely depends on your capacity to do so, but it should be the first thing on your mind the day after the day you recharge after your event.
That totally makes sense. It's good words. All right, so our next question we have says, my organization has only done anniversary galas every 5 years, which means we don't have people who come year after year. What are your thoughts about keeping a lower ticket price, maybe 75 to 100, to try to build up your list of attendees?
Sure. So I feel like there's two questions in there. So the 5-year annual gala, or not annual gala, 5-year anniversary gala is an interesting one. I don't hear that too often, but I can totally see how there's some challenges there in terms of getting the same people year after year. But then again, you also have 5 years to really build your network and truly, really build up the event. So I think there are kind of some pros and cons there to that. As far as lowering your ticket price is a fluid thing. I never recommend a specific ticket amount because it totally depends on the guests, your area, where you live, and the guests that you're trying to target. But again, you want to be careful because ticket price is so crucial for recouping the costs of your event, right? Ticket price is where you kind of start to try to pay for the food and the venue, right? Especially in the decorations. And if you can start at net zero so that you're everything you make the night of the event, right, is pure profit. That's really what you want. The ideal expense ratio is that you're targeting for is 0.3, so 30% of your end proceeds is, you want anything below that. But as far as what ticket price you are looking for, it totally depends. And if you want to get more people at that 5-year gala, because it sounds like probably a much bigger event, you could consider reducing the price. But just know that that's you might make less on your ticket sales. And it's tough. I wish I had a better answer for you. It's so dependent on the demographics, the event itself. There's so many variables there. So just make sure that you're thinking about all the things I talked about today in terms of who you're trying to get there.
Absolutely. All right. So everyone, just don't forget, you can still send in your questions. The question line is still open within your control panel there. All right. As we continue, do you provide marketing materials for packages chosen with organization logos, etc.?
So we do provide promotional materials like the PDFs that you can, print off and include on your, whether it's silent auction tables or, blow up to poster size. We also give you imagery that you can post on social media and within your email campaigns. So we don't provide it with your logo on it, but we give you everything you need to build the promotional materials with your nonprofit logo. Like if it's within an email campaign or your own little poster, we give you a text doc that has all the details so you can choose how much you want to include. So yeah, we give you all the pieces, and then it's up to you to go out and build it however you want, because everyone likes to promote their auction items just a little bit differently. So I guess that answers that.
Absolutely. All right. So the next question we have is, do you think table hosts are the way to go for galas, or is it best to sell per ticket? And then a follow-up to that is, does this affect the high-level donors depending on what you choose?
Totally. So I highly recommend having table captains. I think that is a very important way to sell tickets, especially because if you put people in charge of tables, right, they tend, they feel obligated to fill that table, right? So they're going to work a little bit harder to go out and sell it, right? So I recommend a combination of both, right? You obviously want to have tickets available just to the general public. Anyone who wants to purchase a ticket and attend can, but having table captains is so crucial because that is how you, and then as long as you're coaching them, right? The key here is coaching them how to be a table captain, right? Instead of just telling them, hey, we need you to fill this group of seats, right? Or these 3 tables, coaching them on how to go about doing that, right? Making sure that when they go around and ask businesses, they're asking them in the appropriate way, giving them the tools to do so, whether it's, letter templates, personalized letter templates that they can, put or send to each business, brochures, good stats, things that, will really help them speak intelligently with their network, their friends, and the businesses in the community. The key with your table captains is make sure they're socialites, right? They're people who like to go out and do this sort of thing, and so that they know how to go kind of network almost as like a second nature, right? But of course, it's not everyone has those sorts of people, but I do recommend having table captains as a main driver for selling tickets and corporate tables.
Very good. And to tack on to that, what about a VIP ticket level where they get special access to auction items or other benefits?
Sure. Yeah, I've been hearing about this. Definitely a possibility if you have the interest. If there's a group of people who, what we've seen is, maybe some like a little pre-ceremony, arrive a little early if you're a VIP. The thing you got to be careful there with, though, is that if they start drinking too soon by like 6 p.m., they're going to be wasted by the time the live auction or the funding starts at 8:30 or 9. So be really careful about doing kind of the what do you call it? Just pre-ceremony, I don't know, pre-VIP check-in. And then with the auction items, that's a little tough too, because I don't know if I've heard of having exclusive access to auction items, because you want anybody to bid, right? And just narrowing the focus of who's allowed to bid on certain items, you're basically kind of like eating up your audience, right? You want everyone to kind of be able to do so, but there might be some other perks that you can offer your VIPs. I've heard of some kind of events that have more millennial following. There's actually post-event events, like they kind of turn up the DJ music and then it turns into kind of more of a dance clubby thing. I've heard of that. Maybe VIP tickets allow you to I don't know, have some sort of personal connection to the cause. Maybe they receive some sort of gift. That's always a possibility there. I would just be careful about opening up events earlier for VIPs with alcohol, because that you run into danger there. And then also special access to auction items. The only concern I have about that is that you're limiting yourself, because there might be people who didn't buy a VIP ticket who want to bid who then can't, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, great. Thank you. So we have 3 more questions left for you here, Ian. The next one we have is, we had an event last year where we had 2 bidders going after a concert that was in Ireland, and they would love to have been able to sell each of those 2 bidders the same package. With your packages, can we purchase more than one of the same packages? Should we run into that same situation this year?
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the best parts about Winspire packages and consignment in general, is that you can sell them as many times as you want. We've had events where Ireland packages or what have you will go 10 times, right? And it'll sell for $50,000, $60,000. And we've seen auctioneers play two tables off of each other, entire tables, right? Because they're typically the packages are 2-person packages, but there's a table of 8, and then they want to sell it 4 times, and then there's groups all bidding off each other. And the key here is that you can, it's more lucrative for you. You're going to raise more money if you actually sell the packages to more bidders at a lower level, right? So if a good example is a $3,000 package, right? If you sell a $3,000 package to one bidder for $6,000, you're going to make $3,000, right? But let's say on the way to getting to that $6,000 bid, you have like 3 bidders who are all competing and at $5,000, right? If you stop the bidding at $5,000, you say, hey, we're just going to stop bidding. I'm going to give it to you, you, and you 3 bidders at $5,000. Instead, you've now raised $2,000 3 times, right? Because $5,000 minus $3,000 for the package equals $2,000, and $2,000 times 3 is $6,000. So instead of selling it to one bidder for $6,000 and raising 3, you've instead sold it to 3 bidders for $5,000 and raised 6. And now you have 3 bidders that are actually much happier because they're paying less for the same package. Does that make sense?
It does. That was fast math. Very well done. All right. So 2 more questions here. We have some folks who don't want to give their information. So this is in reference to collecting information on the front end you're talking about. So folks who don't want to give information, do you have any strategy tips for that situation?
Sure. I mean, in those cases, I wonder at what point they don't want to give the information. Is it when they're checking in? Is it when they're purchasing the ticket? Because, typically, especially when you do online registration these days, it requires just an email. If maybe they call in and they just want to buy a ticket, that's totally fine. You can say things like, hey, we need your email to send a receipt, right? A tax receipt for your participation, things like that. But at the end of the day, if someone really doesn't want to give their contact information, they want to be completely anonymous, it's much better to have them there at the event than not. Especially if they're going to participate. But there's definitely things you can say. I know there was some concern about people giving their email when they first arrive at the event. If that's where you're really trying to fill in your database, right? Because maybe you have 200 registrants, but you only have 100 emails, right? So do you ask for email at registration? Yes, I would say yes. And then if you have a bunch of objections, just say, hey, it's so that we can send you a tax receipt at the very end. Make sure that if you say that, you actually are going to do that. But if people object again and say, I really wouldn't feel comfortable with that, or what are you going to do with it? It's just say, maybe we don't have to, or we're not going to, send you any promotional emails. This is purely for the event. But it is important to get those emails into your database just so that you have them, because it's really valuable. It's far better to have them and not communicate with them, if that makes sense, versus having a database and only having 50% of the emails, right? Because there's actually 100%. A lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with the email that isn't just related to communicating with them, right? Especially with, maybe you might be able to jump here, Marty, like Kindful, right? With their donor management software, it's a great identifier, and you can actually find some historical information on people when you have their email address. Do you have anything to add to that, Marty?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this even goes into what Kindful is doing right now in releasing a feature that allows you to have wealth data right inside of your Kindful account. And one of the key pieces of that would be name, address, email address, so that you are able to look those people up and find their public information. And that helps you even target your donors further and know what to ask for. So absolutely, you never know what that information is going to be valuable for in the future.
Totally.
All right, we have one more strategic question for you at the end here. How many fundraising events would you suggest doing per year?
Great question. So definitely one gala a year, right? One kind of big event that you have to really have that face-to-face and do that big cash appeal fund a need, identifying more donors. It's a great networking event. I would recommend doing one golf tournament. Golf tournaments are huge. Kind of doing it in the spring or summer. If you have never done one and you think there's some appetite for it in terms of your donor base, I definitely recommend doing it. They just have time and time again have proved to be profitable. I've seen, many organizations have more than one golf tournament, maybe 2 small ones even, and you can start small, right? You can start with just, 15 people, 20 people. and then let it grow. That's really where the golf tournaments usually start, right? So, and then I also recommend having a few, maybe a few happy hour, social hour engagements, right? These are great, kind of more intimate gatherings that can be after work on a Friday or Thursday, where you get your most important constituents and give them an opportunity to bring friends and say, hey, get them involved. We'd love to meet them. Have it at a VIP donor's house, right? Maybe someone one of your biggest donors has this beautiful house, and try to enroll them to say, hey, we want to start this initiative for recruitment purposes, right? Be very clear about what you're trying to do. Say, hey, we're really trying to get more people in the community involved. We love, our relationship with you, and you've done so much for us. Would you be willing to host a little, social hour get together to support our cause so that we can? But so for them, right? They know that it's about recruitment, but what you tell the public, right, about is like, hey, this is a little check-in update about our initiatives, right? The things that we were raising money for, the stuff that we were raising money for in that spring gala, right? We talked about this, we were going to plant this many trees, or we're going to invest in this device, or we're going to build this playground. Come, let's come find out how we're doing about it, or how we're doing on it, right? And share some statistics, have like an industry expert that's involved with your cause come share some really interesting, engaging information about why it's important, right? Lynn Page talks about doing this with type 1 all the time, where she has these social gatherings, very intimate, and these are a great way to kind of set yourself up for success, right, for your upcoming gala, right? That's really where you can start the membership recruitment, or not membership recruitment, but just new donor recruitment by making them feel like they're part of an intimate social event community. I think that's a really key part. So, between how many events, it totally depends on your size and scope, but at very least, I would be doing a gala golf tournament and a couple social engagements.
Fantastic. Ian, that is excellent advice, and thank you so much. We are running right at the end of our time here, and Ian, we just want to say thanks again for being here and for providing all this excellent information. Anything else that you'd like to say in closing?
No, just thank you so much for having us. Best of luck out there. I know event fundraising is a lot of work. It's big projects, and we love being an information resource for you. We'd love to have you subscribe to our blog. Stay tuned for more free webinars. We're actually having another one tomorrow. It's called the 7 Charity Auction Horrors that you can avoid. So you can check that out on our blog today. But thank you again so much for having me here, Marty, and good luck out there fighting the good fight, raising some money for good causes.
Absolutely. Back at you. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Well, on behalf of Winspire, and thank you from Kindful as well, we bid you a great afternoon. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you out there.